Hello, everyone. I'm Deborah Gardner, your host for Hospitality Today Live, where real life topics from my amazing guests that work in the industry share their opinions, perspectives, stories, and lessons. And today, I have the distinct pleasure to actually talk with the Executive Director of Meetings Events for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, Kristin Torres. Now, Kristin, who actually has over 20 years of experience in the hospitality industry, will share with us a lot. She's going to share with what happened with her largest in-person July event and how it was completely safe, what surprised her the most about the event, what her future meetings look like for 2021, and more. And you will not want to miss this great conversation starting now. And event displays. Well, now I'd like to welcome to the show. Here's Kristin Torres. Hi.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I am so excited to have you here because there is so much we need to talk about pertaining to your events, the association world in this craziness that we live in right now. And I wanted to open up the chat for comments and questions for those that are watching here today too. But I'm going to start by asking you, how did you get into this crazy business in the first place?
You know what's funny about that? People are always surprised to hear how I got into it because I'm one of the few people in the world that started out on my career path, and that's what I was after. So when I was in high school, I actually worked. I grew up in State College, Pennsylvania, and Penn State University is there. And I worked at the hotel, the Nittany Lion Inn, and as a banquet server. And I thought it was so fun. I worked all the events from the meeting side of things to weddings to special events, all of that. And then after high school, I moved to Colorado, not knowing what I wanted to do. And I actually went to school at Metropolitan State University in downtown Denver. And I went to speak with one of the counselors, and he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I really enjoyed working these events." And he said, "It sounds to me like you want to be a meeting planner." And I go, "I don't know what you're talking about."
Yeah, what is that?
We're one of the few schools in the country at the time that had a hospitality program. And so I went through their hospitality program and got my business degree with an emphasis in meeting planning and have been doing it ever since.
Wow, that is amazing. It is kind of interesting how we can kind of fumble into this business, not even knowing. I mean, I remember my first hotel job. I didn't even know what a DOS was. It was like, what is that? What does that entail? But here you are 20 years later. And now you are with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Now, whenever I think of that, I think of the commercial, "What's your beef?"
Yeah.
And I mean, to work there, do you have to like beef?
Actually, you do. So that's that we ask some questions in the interview process, like generally speaking, what's your favorite cut of beef? So we serve beef at all of our meetings, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And catering companies are always shocked by that. And they'll say, "Really, beef? That's the only thing you're going to serve?" Like, yep. And no chicken, no pork. However, we are friendly to the seafoods because a nice surf and turf everybody loves.
Oh,
So,
that's so funny. Well, and here I am, a vegan. I don't even eat beef, but I do ride cattles.
that's excellent.
In our industry, you never know when a cattle is going to show up. And here I was in Texas for an event and had a blast with that.
It's amazing.
That's the only experience I have on that. But how long have you been with them, and how has it been going? I mean, today, the question for events is either, cancel, postpone, or go virtual. And when you had your July event, happened to be at the Gaylord in Colorado, where there are a lot of cattle, you all decided to go virtual in the middle of all of this pandemic. Tell us about that experience, which was, again, right in the thick of the pandemic.
Yeah, so we actually got very lucky with our annual citywide. We're generally in the first quarter of the year. So last year, our event was in San Antonio, and we had about 8,000 cattlemen in San Antonio that first week of February. And then, like everybody, we started shutting down events this spring. So what we ran into is, much like everybody did, a lot of confusion on what was happening with it. And so we typically have our legislative conference in Washington, D.C. in March, April timeframe. That was one of the first ones that we made the decision to, we just full on canceled it. And then after that, we canceled about 6 different events last spring. And our group is very, very social. And this industry is very much so face-to-face. So it was very important to our members that they had a chance to get together. We also have a meeting every summer that we call our summer business meeting, and they opted to hold that meeting in person in July. So we typically have about 700 people for that event, 700 to 800, and we knew that we weren't going to get that many people. We also knew that it wasn't likely that we were going to be able to be allowed to have that many people. And honestly, it wasn't an easy decision whether or not we were going to meet in person. They really struggled with that. We went back and forth a dozen different times on if we were going to do it. And then once we figured out that we were going to be able to do it with the city and the facility, then we were full steam ahead. And as I said, we normally have about 700 people there. And it ended up, we had about 450 people there in person. And then we had another 175 online.
Wow, that was actually a very good turnout, because it wasn't only, 2 or 3 months earlier that this whole thing, kind of blew up in our face. So that was actually a very good turnout. And I would imagine the Gaylord did a fantastic job as far as helping the process. I mean, what was the communication pre-con pertaining to getting everybody on board with all the safety factors and protocols?
Mm-hmm. So I have a team of planners. So we have a couple different people that are assigned to a couple different things. And the one planner that was working with the Gaylord, they spoke every couple of days, honestly.
Okay.
Finding out where things were with the city. And at the time, our governor and the mayor of Denver were doing daily updates. And then that scaled back a little bit, and they started doing weekly updates. So we were, tuned into those. And then the county in which the Gaylord falls is under the umbrella of the Tri-County Health Department here in Colorado. And they also had some of their own rules and regulations. And so it was kind of juggling all of those things. We had the city of Aurora, the Tri-County Health Department, and then the facility. Obviously, the facility was the easiest to work with of all of those. And they were fantastic. They were super supportive the entire time. They applied for the variance for us. And so, we gave them documentation and whatnot, and they took that all forward to the health department and kept us informed along the way. And then at the very last minute, about a week out from our event, with numbers fluctuating in Colorado, we went from being able to have all the folks that we were hoping to in one room to that we could have no more than 100 people in a single room inside.
Right.
Our places are still like that now, or even less.
Right.
And so they worked with us to figure out how we were going to do that. And we literally took our general session that we were going to have, that again would normally have 500, 600 people in it. And we set it in different sections of the ballroom, had the air walls closed, and then we simulcast the program into those different rooms. Yeah, it was complex to say the least, but they made it as easy as possible, quite honestly.
That's great.
And they really stepped up with all of the protocol that needed to be in place. So they had hand sanitizer, and they were helping with those room sets. So when we went and did a site visit, they had a couple of room sets set up so that we could actually see what it's going to look like. And they helped us work through all of that. One thing was really, really nice, and we had the luxury of this, was that we were about the only event in the building.
Oh, that's
so
nice.
We pretty much could use any meeting space that we wanted or needed to.
Yep.
So we could spread out a lot,
Right.
which helped a ton, because that part was challenging to figure out how to maintain your schedule and not have it have to go on for 2 weeks, but allow for time for people to clean the rooms in between.
Right.
And everything just takes a little bit longer.
Yep.
The other part that was really great for us from the event staff side of things was that they actually had all hands on deck. When we knew we were having a couple of events that were going to be in separate ballrooms, they had salespeople down there. They had folks from all over the hotel helping us move people, which was fantastic. And also it helped because if people were upset that they couldn't be in the main room necessarily, then the hotel kind of took the brunt for that rather than staff.
Sure.
And then probably the biggest area where they were the most helpful was with requiring that people were wearing masks, but then making sure that they were wearing those masks, enforcing those rules. And we have a group that maybe they weren't super excited about that. Lots of people, it's very controversial, I think, of how people feel about wearing masks. And we felt we weren't sure how our folks were going to be with it, honestly. And it was kind of on the front end of all of that mask wearing business. They handled all of that for us. And so if there were people that weren't doing it, we didn't have to go up and be trying to enforce that. They were handling all of that. Or if there were too many people sitting together at a table, they would take care of that. Very professionally, very nice. But they did take care of all of that for us. And then the other thing that we really worked with them a lot on is how to do some of these meal functions differently. So it was still a good experience for our attendees. So we had 2 large meal functions, actually 3. The first one was our general session. It was actually a luncheon. And we changed the service with that, but they were very, very flexible with us on how they did that. So they staffed up because they had more people handling more tables, and there was more service because nothing was preset. We would normally have done. The next day, we typically had done in the past like a boxed lunch kind of thing, and it was almost like a working lunch for committees. And we were trying to figure out exactly how we were going to do that, because typically we would have committee meetings breaking at different times, and they would go get their lunches and go back in their rooms and work. And we were like, it would be great if we could get them outside. So we worked with the hotel, and they actually set up grills outside and grilled burgers for our attendees. And it was better than anything we've done in the past. People loved getting outside. the burgers smelled great. So you get that whole experience of going outside and something being grilled. And it was just different. Gave everybody a break from being locked away in a meeting room. It was really, really great. And then the third big function that we did was actually a pack auction. It was a live auction. And we weren't sure exactly how we were going to do that either. And at one point in time, our plan was to we could have 100 people in a room, and that's what we were going to do. We're going to have 100 people, and that was it. And then we quickly realized that we had more than 100 people that were going to want to attend this event. Some of them big donors to the pack, and how can we turn those people away?
Right. Wow.
So we were trying to figure out how we could still have an auction and have these people be a part of this event with the simulcast. And it was actually one of our staff members in Washington, D.C. He's an auctioneer, and he actually came up with a great plan and had a different set of, the auctioneer was streamed into each room, but then we had ringmen, people counting the bids and looking for people bidding in each of the rooms. And we actually raised more money than we thought we would have. It was an event that we weren't even sure we were going to do, let alone pull it off, and we raised almost $60,000 in one evening. The rooms started bidding against each other. And we realized that it's actually something that we could incorporate in a regular year.
Sure.
And how the hotel was so great with us for that event as well is because when we were originally going to limit the amount of people that were in there, we realized that we had about 350 people that weren't going to have anywhere to have dinner. And so they worked with their outlets, and that wouldn't have normally even been open, and set special menus for us. And of course, we've already discussed we have beef everywhere, so they put extra beef items on the menu.
Right.
And they were just so great to work with. I can't even explain how wonderful they were to work with.
That's great. And, a lot of hotels are out there working their butts off, trying to get everything in place. And to hear that the Gaylord in particular, which is not very old. I mean, it's like a year-old hotel and resort in Colorado, to step up and make it happen for you. That's just great news to hear. So, and I'm hearing a lot of hotels are really stepping up their game to make that happen and accommodate groups like yours. And I'm hearing a lot of groups are in a buyout situation because of all this. So it's kind of a nice experience for the attendees. And I know you utilize some graphics. I'm going to put them up here for you because I understand these are just some of the ideas that you utilize within your conferences.
Yeah. So a couple of reasons why I wanted to share these graphics. Everybody absolutely loved these, both our attendees and folks that happened to be in the hotel, other guests and hotel staff. And I share it because it's a way for other planners to maybe, you're welcome to do the idea if you want, but find something that applies to your group.
Right. Wow, that was brilliant. The one cow apart. I love that.
And we had people taking selfies with them, and we did floor stickers with them.
Great idea.
And it was also a way of masks are enforced. They're required. And it's literally the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Not ignore what's happening. Can't. So we took it and made it our own and just tried to have a little bit of fun with it because we have to do it. Yeah. And then it's not like you're trying to downplay what's happening necessarily. Just embrace it.
Right.
It's part of the event. And we had a lot of questions from people of like, how did you handle people passing in the halls, or how did you handle these events? And we really just took it on as it was a puzzle to figure out, but bottom line is there's still people, and we want to make the best event for them that we can.
That is a brilliant idea. These are great. And to know that they actually were having fun to have selfies with them too. So post-con, what was the feedback of your members and guests and overall?
Yeah, we actually received really great feedback. Again, everything wasn't perfect. Something we learned for sure out of this is that you need to allow more time in between the sessions for, especially when you have the hybrid component, getting set up for that hybrid portion. So we had a couple of late starts for things and things along those lines, but I think overall everybody was very, very pleased, and they were very, especially after the fundraiser and we were able to raise money for our PAC. Overall, it was really good.
That is great. Good to hear. Good to hear. And it's only going to get better, no matter if you're going into a hybrid situation or face-to-face or virtual, no matter what. Now, we have quite a few people that want to ask you some questions from the chat. So why don't we switch over to them because they're curious of what you just shared above and beyond. I am going to start with David Kleiman, that would like to know a little bit more about your thoughts when events restart in full force post-vaccine. Now, we do need to talk about the vaccine. How can suppliers, hoteliers, et cetera, effectively restaff their venues, properties, when so many people are forced out, leaving the industry due to the economic need? Would love your perspective on that.
So that's funny that question came up, because I have thought the same thing, because it's not like a switch you can just flip it on and suddenly we're back up to full speed.
Right.
I think it may be oversimplifying this, but I think the key to a lot of this is communication. And it was communication in that event that we planned, but it's communication with anything you have going forward. So right now, everybody's still hesitant on, are they going to have the event? Are they not going to have the event? And I think the more that we can have communication with the cities that we're going into, the venues that we're going to, can help them really start their process in bringing some of those people back. I do think we're going to have a labor shortage for some. I know there are so many people in the hospitality industry that are furloughed and laid off right now, and it's awful. I really feel for everyone, and so I'm hoping that there's a good pool of people that will be able to get back to work right away. But again, I think it's totally notification. Sorry, for the day.
Hey, we're live.
So truly communicating so that people can plan as much as possible is, I think, really what all of us have to do in this industry.
Yes.
We've been communicating about our citywide has moved to next July. Was supposed to be in the first quarter in 2021, or excuse me, next August. And we've been having a lot of communication with our decorator and the venue, what our plans are, so that if anything's adjusting, that they can adjust too, because they're all strapped for cash.
Right. Well, and to David's point, which was a great question regarding the vaccine, though, I've seen reports that I'd like to share here. Some 40% of 1,200 American leisure and business travelers surveyed just in November said that they actually will wait at least a few months before rolling up their sleeves to see if the shot are even effective. And nearly 1 in 10 said that they would not get the vaccine at all. And so we're seeing some feedback in our industry pertaining to this, especially for your upcoming events like Burning Man, their event in 2021. If you don't get the vaccine, you cannot attend. Yeah. Is this going to happen with the National Cattlemen's Association as well? I mean, are you guys going to be doing the same thing when we get back to in-person events?
We haven't gotten that far in our discussions on the vaccine yet. Everybody's been a little bit in the wait and see mode. That said, we have had some in-person events since that July event, smaller scale. And we have one we're planning for first week of February 2021. But all of those events have social distancing and safety guidelines put into place. So we're definitely continuing to move forward with that.
For your February event.
Yes, we actually have 2 February events. Our first one is going to be in person. And then one of the things that I wanted to bring up today was reminding everybody that out of adversity comes opportunity. And the graphic you just had up there is a new event that we have come up with. We're calling it our winter reboot of our convention. And we realized that we had a gap of time that we weren't going to be connecting kind of more broadly with some of our members and our past attendees. And we have a new administration coming in, which is extremely important to our organization and to our industry.
Sure.
So we want to be able to talk to people about that.
Sure.
And we have a whole slew of exhibitors and advertisers that they do a rollout in this first quarter of the year. And by us moving to the third quarter, that doesn't really work really well with their marketing plans typically. So we came up with a whole another event that is allowing to tap into all of that opportunity. And it will be, right now, it's on track to be a profitable event as well. And gives us an opportunity to engage in a way that we haven't before. And we have done a couple of virtual events, and Cattlemen aren't always known as being super tech savvy, some of the group. And so what we found is that's actually not the case. And we're getting a lot of participation, and they're hungry for information. And it's given us a lot of opportunities.
That's really good. And pertaining to your future, conferences, Randall Radier, who's actually in the association and in the farming business as well, wants to know, are you going to be taking advantage of looking at outdoor locations, related to your industry as well, which I think has always in the past not a good thing, because you never know if it's going to rain or snow. But now there seems to be some more open talks about that. How about for you as well?
Yeah. So again, out of the adversity that we're dealing with now, by moving our big citywide convention to next August, we have all kinds of opportunities that we don't typically have in February, because it's a little too cold in Nashville to be outside. So we are planning several events outside in conjunction with the convention, taking advantage of the weather. It's going to be toasty, but not snowing on us at least. And that not only will allow us to socially distance and spread out and be safe, but allows for a different experience than what people might normally have coming to our event in February. Additionally, in the summer, our organization is extremely family friendly. Our event is extremely family friendly. We are realizing that we're going to have an opportunity to have folks bring their families more than maybe they can in February, because kids are in school.
Sure.
So kind of looking at our event as a whole to see what we can do to take advantage of these new opportunities in front of us. Additionally, we have a lot of farm equipment at our event. So major exhibitors are John Deere and New Holland and equipment companies.
Right.
We have actually spread the exhibit outside as well, and are going to have outdoor opportunities for those folks to have displays. And they can bring in some pieces of equipment that are maybe too big to go inside, or maybe a challenge to get inside. And so it, again, just gives us a lot of opportunity for some different types of experiences to put together for our guests.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, they're hungry for more information. They're hungry probably for a lot more creativity, because we can now. It's more acceptable now than ever. I do have another question here. Actually, this one is from a very favorite friend of mine, Marty, who comes from the association industry for 30 some years, but he wants to talk to you more about the expense, the financial side of it. Obviously, there are added costs. May I ask, was it a shared expense, or did the association cover for it all?
It was a shared expense. The association picked up a big portion of it, but the hotel did work with us on some pieces and parts. I don't know if that would still be the case at this point in time, because at the time we were the largest event that they had held to date in the pandemic. And so I think that there's probably still opportunity for that, talking to your facilities and how they can help you share the expense. My experience so far in planning the event that moved to August is that it happens to be another Gaylord, actually, but that they will be providing some additional cleaning and things that normally would have been one of our expenses if we would have wanted it like on the trade show floor, but they're handling all of that. And then obviously there's additional expense for hand sanitizing stations and signage and things along those lines. And that's going to be kind of both of us doing a little bit of that, because again, it's a great sponsorship opportunity for hand sanitizers. Like, we have a whole safety sponsorship package we put together.
Right. Yeah. At this point, you and along with all these meeting professionals, it's important to have that intact right now. And it happened quick. I know.
Yeah,
definitely. I know. Actually, as a matter of fact, regarding your signage, David really likes your signage. We've got that great comment from him. And same with Lisa. She totally agrees, because that was such a brilliant idea. And I hope other meeting professionals catch on to that as well. And so was there, from that experience, was there anything that you would have done differently next time? Is there anything, because you got to up the ante and improve. That's what the members and the guests are going to be expecting.
So I think probably the biggest lesson that came out of that whole thing was that as much as you possibly can, make a decision earlier and stick with it. And be communicating with attendees earlier. So that was probably the biggest piece of negative feedback that we got from people, because we were trying to sort through how we were going to get the event done and if we could even have it and all of those things. And they wanted more communication. And I realize it's hard because it was an ever moving target.
Right.
But just communicating with them as much as possible, I think, was probably the biggest lesson there.
Yeah.
And we really didn't know how people were going to react and how they were going to participate in the event. Really just didn't have any idea. And we were so pleasantly surprised that everybody was very understanding and accommodating. And I think that's Cattlemen. They're great salt of the earth folks to begin with. I'm very lucky as a meeting planner in that regard. They're very complimentary, but I think most people will find that people just need an understanding of what you're doing, and they want to have confidence in that you're going to keep them safe, or you're doing everything to keep them safe.
Right.
So it's, again, communication for them. And I think for the most part, people, if they're choosing to come in person to events, that they're putting their faith in you and they're going to participate the way that you want them to, or the way that they need to be safe.
Yeah. And I think there's a reflection on the history at your association for that confidence level too. They know you've handled situations in the past beautifully. So that probably wouldn't be a surprise if everybody was cool, calm, collective, following the protocols and doing what they can. It probably comes from a reflection of what you have done in the past to build that confidence. And now I know those that are watching us right now really want to know. The big question is, what does it look like for associations in the next year or two? What does it look like? Because obviously you're booked farther in advance. It's the way the association world is. I mean, in the hotel business, I remember booking Marty's conferences 10, 12 years out. So what should we be expecting? What does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, and we're one of those associations. We're booked through 2030.
Yeah, right. It would not surprise me.
Yeah. And so from my perspective, I think that it's going to be a little bit of baby steps. I think everybody's kind of hoping that it's going to go gangbusters and everybody's going to jump right in, but I still think we're going to have some baby steps with it. I know that our group in particular, they really, really want to meet. We're expecting to still have a very large group this summer. And so because of that, we're still planning on all the safety protocols in place so that we can make sure that we are able to have the event, because I do feel like the vaccine is coming and everybody's chomping at the bit to get it, but it's still going to take a little while.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I do think it's going to be some baby steps and into 2022 before we're seeing a lot of the bigger shows.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got another question here from Lisa this time pertaining to programs with speakers at your conferences. Anything new there that they need to know about? How they need to handle the safety protocols? What have you been doing for them?
So we've had most of our speakers have been virtual, quite honestly. And I think that's taps into the kind of the flexibility is the name of the game in this whole thing. Mm-hmm. And whereas before you might not have considered, like if a speaker doesn't want to be there in the room and they're only going to do something virtually, you might not have considered it in the past. But I think now it's more about content and being accommodating and making those changes. So we haven't seen a ton of change with some of those speakers. We've had a few folks at the event in July that had some questions, but we didn't have anybody back out or anything. So I think they're also chomping at the bit to get back to meeting in person.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I can contest for that. Mm-hmm. And one thing, I was on the U.S. Association webinar yesterday. They had plenty of leaders around the world on this webinar, and they were talking about the virtual being harder to plan than face-to-face. You agree with that?
Oh my gosh, yes. It's a completely different mind shift. And I think there are planners out there that will agree that we're all very good at putting out those fires on site, but you don't have the control when it's virtual. I mean, there's just you can't wing it quite as much. And it's definitely a different mindset. Everything's got to be on the front end, and it can't be something that, I'll deal with that on site, or I know how to handle it on site, but it's definitely a different level of stress. And I have been surprised on some of those virtual meetings of how tired you are after them. It's a mental exhaustion. And after sitting there for hours and hours and hours too.
Oh, good point. Because face-to-face, it's more physical probably because you're running from one side of the conference center to the other, whereas virtual is more mental. Oh, I never even thought about that.
It is definitely mentally taxing.
That's interesting. Yeah. Huh. That makes a lot of sense, no doubt. And I think you're not alone. I think a lot of meeting professionals are in the same boat, that the virtual is more exhausting because there's a lot more detail and it's hard to control anything without having a lot of communication, as you were mentioning before. Mm-hmm. So from your experience working through this new pandemic world that we're in, what should other planners like yourself remember in order to be successful like you and what you've been experiencing to this point?
I think the bottom line is, this goes for virtual and in person and hybrid, you're dealing with people. Bottom line, you're dealing with people. And we get very caught up in the fact that we have all these logistics to check off. And as planners, we're stressed because we're also trying to learn how to do these virtual events while pulling it together. And so once you kind of get your brain around it, you have to think completely differently. Once I realized that it was like one big general session and you're kind of planning the flow of everything, you have to remember that it's people on the other side of that screen. What do you want them to take away from this? Because again, we get so focused on the logistics and what we need to do to pull it off and make it happen seamlessly, that we're not remembering who's on the receiving end of things. And I try to remind people of that, for in-person events as well, because a lot of times we get very caught up in logistics and how we're doing this, that, and the other, or we have a schedule that maybe goes from 7 a.m. till we have people running till 8 p.m. Like, you have to remember you got to feed people in there sometime too, because you're dealing with human beings and they get tired and it's overwhelming for people to take in that much information. So I think that's probably the number one takeaway, is it's all about people. And when we were looking at those signs that we used earlier, the other reason that I bring that up is, again, it's people, and everybody has different groups and they have different thoughts and qualities about that group, things that they would find funny or relate to, and try to capitalize on that when you're putting together your program. Like, what's most important for your people, and how can you take these things that we're dealing with and make them relatable to your group? So number one is that. And the elephant in the room, again, is that we're all in this together. Let's not pretend that there's not a pandemic happening, or try to pretend like it's not going on and that we're not all dealing with it. Embrace it. Make it part of the program. Talk about it. And that helps people to relate with what you're trying to get across to them. And third most important thing is be as flexible as possible. I think in dealing with a hybrid event, any in-person event, being flexible, because you just don't know what's going to happen if the numbers are going up in the area where you're planning an event. You're trying to hold something in person, and now you have to shift and put things in different sections of the ballroom, and maybe look at how you're going to do your program differently. It's hard sometimes, because as meeting planners, we like to check things off our list and have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed. But flexibility is the name of the game, for sure.
Yeah, those are 3 great points. And especially since you've been through it already, and it's not over. There's going to be some more surprises, more mistakes we're all going to make, more learning curves that we're going to go through, because this turbulence is not over. 2021 looks pretty much, what we're going to have to deal with. But I think now we have some knowledge behind ourselves in all of this, right? I mean, you've been through it. Now your members, your guests have been through it. Now it's just a matter of how to deal with it along the way. And hopefully the vaccine really does help. I know there's going to be some major decisions that are going to have to happen there as well. And I believe that those that are on this call right now, or are on this, watching this episode right now, are very, very very grateful for what you're sharing. And Lisa definitely makes it a good point. Good to know. Thanks for that reply. Randall totally agrees that virtual is harder. And Marty, of course, thanks for all that you are contributing to today as well. So I know I've got more questions for you, and I know a lot of other people do too, those that might have just joined us. We've got Kristin Torres here with us, and we definitely want everyone to ask any type of questions that you might have for her. But I know that gratitude is definitely one of the things that we have to embrace this year too. There's always a silver lining, like you've mentioned what you have learned, but personally, is there any gratitude that has come out of this for you?
Yes, on several different levels, honestly. For me personally, I have 2 teenage daughters, and one of them is a senior in high school. So for me, it's a silver lining has been that there hasn't been as much travel this year. And I've been able to be home and just be around a little bit more than I have in the past. So that's a big silver lining. And I feel like there's different connections on different levels with people than we've had in the past, because everybody's been so hustle and bustle all the time that it's kind of a different level. And even my team, this spring when we were all 100% virtual, and we used Teams in our office, and we didn't use it a ton before the pandemic, but after that, everybody kept saying that they still felt very connected to each other because we were on Teams together all day, every day. So it's been really great in that regard, in that we could strengthen those bonds a little bit, and that's going to make us even stronger for pulling together all these events in the future. The other thing that's been really great for our team is that we work for a fantastic organization. And I mentioned earlier that our members and our attendees are the salt of the earth, and they really truly mean that from the bottom of my heart. They are so appreciative and thankful, and we'll be on site at a meeting and they come up and say, we know how hard you work and we know how hard it is to pull this together, and thank you. And a lot of other organizations don't have that luxury. And it's been really great to see that they're still as supportive this entire time. Just been so flexible and really just supportive in general, I think. Concerned about us, really care about employees of the organization. It's been great.
That's nice. That's nice. And it's interesting, although we have seen a surge in COVID-19 this year, but we also have seen a surge in association membership. And so to your point, it seems like everybody is in need for more than just a virtual hug. We want to be around each other. That's why I really believe face-to-face is going to come around tenfold when we do get back to in-person events. Don't you agree?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
There's no question. I mean, our group really struggled with canceling any type of event. And, a lot of groups, I have heard from other planners that they would look 3 or 4 months out and they're like, oh, we're not going to have that. We didn't operate that way. We waited up until about as close in as we could to cancel, because they do not want to. They want to meet in person.
That's great.
So I would agree with you 100% that it's going to be gangbusters. And
it really is. It really is. And I know, hybrid has been the big buzz for 2021 as well. So don't you feel that that's going to be our first step getting back to face-to-face?
Yeah. And that's how we did our event this past summer. And what was really interesting about it is that was the first sort of hybrid of anything that we had done. And I had been thinking about it for a while, that we should add some virtual components to our events. And we were like, our people won't participate. And that's actually not true. We had some folks at that meeting that have never attended before,
Right.
but attended virtually.
Right. Right.
And so now, again, we're looking at different opportunities. That was kind of eye-opening to us, like, okay, maybe people will, and maybe this is a way for people that can't travel. You know, a lot of times our members, they work outside and they,
Sure.
they have to take care of the animals every day.
Sure.
So unless you can get somebody to do that for you, sometimes it's very hard to get away. And so how can we create something that taps into all those folks that maybe don't want to travel?
Right. Right.
So
Right.
it's definitely created a lot of opportunities and thought-provoking things along the way for us, a lot for us to think about and to process.
Sure, sure. Well, we've got time pretty much for one more question for you, and I'm going to take that from the chat. And it looks like it's from Michael Farr, and it's more of a contract question, which I know a lot of other associations and even on the hotel side or the supplier side is going to want to know. There's been a lot of talk about the force majeure. Is there anything that you can share with us pertaining to that? Has that changed? Has that been revised?
So what's kind of funny about that is I was actually sitting at an industry event on March 11th when they declared a pandemic. And I was sitting in a crisis management session. And in that crisis management, we were talking about contract language and what language we put in there. And for years, for probably 10 or 12 years, our contracts have had in them pandemic language. And our force majeure has been airtight. And I have felt for all the people that haven't necessarily had that in their contracts, because it has helped us so much. I mean, there was no question on any of the hotel contracts that we had that force majeure language was airtight. Now, that said, I have found going forward, as we're looking to contract things in the future, that facilities aren't necessarily as agreeable to that force majeure language. And I know some of the chains have come up with more of impossibility language that they're more comfortable with. But for sure, I think that's going to be a sticking point going forward. It's kind of like after 9/11, it was really
right
a sticking point with all the terrorist language, but now it's going to be even bigger, I think.
Right. Well, and I think that's where your 3 points come in that you shared with us earlier. Relating to today's people includes all our partnerships that we should be collaborating with during this time. Keep the elephant in the room obvious, which the force majeure is going to be even more so. And then being flexible in order to seek new opportunities, like you mentioned as well. And we don't want to forget those new opportunities, and force majeure is somewhere where we have to be flexible.
Absolutely. And in the whole negotiation process, you've got to come to a middle ground on all of it. And so I think as planners, we're going to be wanting to keep everything as tight as possible and be as safe as possible, but we're going to have to give on some of it because we're all in it together.
Right. Sure. We really are. Wow. Mm-hmm. Well, this has been a wealth of information that you have been able to share with everyone, and can't thank you enough for being part of today's show. I know we can continue to go on and on and on, but we're running out of time. Is there a way that any of our viewers can contact you to further discuss any questions that they might have or to follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on LinkedIn. Please reach out to me there, or you can reach out to me on my email. It's scrolling across the screen there. And then our website, if you want to check out some of the things that we have going on there, is convention.ncba.org. You're welcome to check anything out there. And then everyone should know that if there's anything that I've talked about, or those signs, or anything that we're doing, I'm more than happy to share any of that. Everybody's in this together. So no point in reinventing the wheel sometimes. So
Right. Well, that was a that was a golden nugget, definitely for anybody. I can see the comments going through that. Oh my gosh, that was a light bulb and a golden nugget for anybody to keep their audiences engaged and safe and moving forward. And congratulations to you and all of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association for really sticking through it. It's only going to get better for your association. It sounds like going into 2021. So kudos to you, and we'll all be following you, no doubt.
Very good. Thank you so much for having me on today. I appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. It was an absolute pleasure, and definitely want to say happy holidays to you and your family. Be safe, and we'll see you for sure next year.
Okay, very good. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you all so much for joining today's show with Kristin Torres with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. And if you want to see this conversation again or want to share this episode with others, please do so just from our HTL Facebook page, YouTube, and now LinkedIn as well. And definitely subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'd love to have everyone following us as much as possible. And if you want, you can also contact us by email at hello@hospitalitytodaylive.com for any questions, comments, or suggestions. We'd love to hear from you. And we also want to give a special thank you to Yard Art Greetings for sponsoring today's show. Now, we are on a roll as we're finishing out this year of 2020 with some more fabulous guests that we want to share with you. And this time it's 2 for the price of 1. Okay, well, our show is free to watch, but this time I've got 2 guests at the same time that will be here with us that will provide even a different perspective to the show. They are sisters and they are co-owners of the Hot Air Expositions, Stephanie and Amanda Long. Now, what's it like to run a business as sisters, compete in the hot air balloon space, and not now having to deal with pivoting during the COVID-19? Well, we're going to find out all about this in the next show. And are there good days and bad days? Well, they're going to share this information with us. And we might even find out all about this while we're up in the air with them as well. So mark your calendar being up in the air with us, no doubt. And we want to definitely have you join us for it. So next Tuesday, same time. I'm Deborah Gardner. Thank you so much for joining us here. And remember, make your most important thing your most important thing. Have a productively busy week, everybody.